Ok, eh bien, bonsoir à tous. Donc, on est vendredi, c'est le cinquième jour de notre symposium sur la notion de l'art, de la durabilité et de l'engagement. Comme je l'ai exprimé les jours précédents, cette année évidemment un peu particulière pour tout le monde, donc nous n'avons évidemment pas pu tenir cette conférence au musée du Louvre, comme c'était le cas les années précédentes, ainsi qu'à l'école du Louvre. Donc nous la tenons en ligne, ce qui nous permet en fait de développer nos partenariats internationaux et d'avoir tous les jours de nouveaux intervenants connectés aux quatre coins de la planète, en l'occurrence c'est le cas aujourd'hui. Donc cette année, on a mis en place un partenariat avec la Serpentine Galleries à Londres et avec le magazine Art Review, à qui on confie ce soir notre dernière soirée sous la forme d'une carte blanche. Voilà, on est évidemment très heureux de vous retrouver ce soir. Je vais présenter rapidement tous nos intervenants et puis surtout, je vais laisser la parole à Fee Churchman, qui est le senior éditeur de Art Review en Asie et qui va mener l'ensemble de la conversation. Ce que je voulais vous indiquer aussi, c'est que en fait, l'auditorium du Louvre permet d'accueillir 600 personnes. Et cette semaine, en fait, on a accueilli 600 personnes, puisque ce soir, il y a plus de 100 personnes qui sont connectées et inscrites. Et en fait, sur l'ensemble de la semaine, on a eu exactement le même nombre, donc on s'en réjouit. C'est aussi une très belle façon de se dire que justement, les projets qu'on porte, les artistes qu'on soutient, les associations qu'on défend, les penseurs, les philosophes qu'on a accueillis et les auteurs aussi toute cette semaine, eh bien, ils vous intéressent aussi en ligne et vous les soutenez grâce à ce projet sous cette forme cette année. Donc, on en est évidemment ravis. Voilà, alors ce soir, je vais faire une présentation en français et après, évidemment, on va passer à l'anglais. Donc, on donne carte blanche au magazine Art Review, qui est notre partenaire, comme je l'indiquais. Hier, c'était une carte blanche à Serpentine Galleries. Et ce soir, donc, le thème de cette conférence, c'est What can art do? Et donc, pour ça, on reçoit Piwi, qui est le fondateur, qui est un artiste, un curateur de Green Papaya Project à Manille. Et en l'occurrence, il est connecté à Manille en ce moment, donc il est presque minuit chez lui. Donc, c'est évidemment formidable qu'il soit parmi nous. On reçoit aussi Marv Recinto, qui est une art critique philippine. Et donc, l'ensemble de cette conversation est modéré par Fee Churchman, qui, comme je le disais, est senior éditeur du magazine Art Review en Asie. Voilà, donc c'est suffisant pour la partie française. Now we're going to switch to English. And again, I just wanted to thank you so much all for being with us, especially Pee-wee, because it's the middle of the night for you. And so we're very pleased and honored that you were able to join us today because you are based in Manila. And of course, Fee is going to develop your project with Green Papaya Project that you've created. And also Marv, that is connected from the UK and from London, I guess. And we're very happy to have you as well. And so Fee Churchman, who is our partner tonight and who's going to host the entire conversation, will make a short presentation of all of you. And so Fee, it's all yours, and thank you again for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Maureen, for that introduction. I will just do another short introduction in English this time, but you basically said it all in French just a minute ago. But Nabata Roldan Pee-wee is a multimedia artist and curator, and he's currently the artistic director of Green Papaya Art Projects, which he co-founded in 2000. Green Papaya is an artist-run initiative based in Quezon City. But I'm going to let Pee-wee tell you more about Green Papaya because he is the one to tell you about that. And then I'm just going to turn to Marv Recinto, who is one of our writers at Art Review Asia. And I have to say, I'm always really excited to hear about what you're planning to write about next. Marv specializes in contemporary art of the Philippines and Southeast Asia. So actually, while I'm moderating this talk, I'm really here to actually learn from both of you about the wider art scene and the socio-political situation in the Philippines right now. So maybe we could turn to Pee-wee first, if you'd like to give us an introduction to how Green Papaya Art Projects came into existence.
Good evening. So in my side, it's good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Thank you. Thanks for Nothing and Art Review for bringing me here. So I co-founded Green Papaya in 2000 with Donna Miranda, a choreographer and dancer. And our objective was to provide a platform for young artists who are out of school, universities, trying to explore their practice, either as individuals or in collaboration with other artists in other disciplines. And at the same time, we were running a design company along the space. And maybe at this initial stage, I have something to say to the friends, audience tonight. That Green Papaya has been partly funded by the French Embassy in the Philippines for the first 7 years, and we're grateful for that. It has helped Green Papaya to run this long, actually, because the embassy in the Philippines in 1999 until 2007 were holding an annual French festival, which is a collaboration between French artists and Filipino artists. And the design section of Green Papaya was doing and designing all the collaterals for this festival. And so the money that we were earning from the French embassy is being channeled to run Green Papaya. So, you know, there's much for me to thank for the French government for that. Um, so that was 20 years ago. And we've done a lot of things and have gone to other places with Green Papaya, with our artists. But now we're more concerned about closing Green Papaya, which we decided sometime in 2016. We're closing Green Papaya in May of 2021. And maybe we can talk more about why we have come to that decision, what are our plans from this time until our closing, and the recent tragedy that happened in Green Papaya during this pandemic. So maybe Marv can take over from me for now, and then we get back to talking about Green Papaya.
Sure. Well, I wanted to touch on why you chose the name Green Papaya in the first place, because the green papaya is kind of an unripe papaya. It's on its way to becoming ripe, but it's still the fruit. And so I was reading something that Donna wrote very recently about how it's about the state of becoming. And I think that's a really interesting premise for Green Papaya to take on and kind of continue to foster in the last 20 years that you've been open. So if you want to, how did that name come about?
We were very conscious of using a very Asian name. And papaya is very Asian. Either it's a fruit or a vegetable. It depends on how you use it. If it's an unripe, then for us it's a vegetable. And if it's yellow papaya, green papaya, you can use for a vegetable dish. But you know, you can eat papaya as a fruit, right? So we like the idea of using a name that is some kind of a metaphor, you know, of a state of becoming, because we believe that young artists are in such a state. Okay, they are newly graduate from the universities, but are not mature enough, are not established enough in their practices. So Green Papaya was actually founded for them, right? And then we thought that, you know, a papaya cannot remain green forever. So, you know, so after 20 years, we thought that it's time to allow papaya to ripen and then move out from the scene and allow younger generations to take over whatever it is that we've started, or maybe they can start something new and maybe to become more relevant to the present condition, especially with the pandemic. We never thought that we will get to this point, but yes, we're here. We're celebrating our 20 years this year, and next year it's time to say goodbye. Maybe I should elaborate more on how we came about into this decision to close. And there are three basic reasons that why I decided way back in 2016 to, to make a definite date to close Green Papaya. Artist run spaces in the Philippines normally would have a lifespan of 2 to 3 years because these are normally started by young people. And so when these young people, when these artists get to be a little bit more mature, they know what to do with their career. Some of them are being picked up by, established galleries, or some of them settle down. And there's no choice for them but to close Green Papaya. But as I was saying earlier, we were lucky enough that we had security for 7 years because of that project we were doing with the French embassy. But beyond our seventh year, we just couldn't close on our own because we felt that Green Papaya was being owned by the community. And every time we announce that we are closing, then the community comes in and asks, what can we do, just for you to continue? So it has become like that year after year after year. At the end of the year, I asked myself, am I closing tomorrow? Am I closing, the following year? Mm-hmm. So I don't want a situation wherein I wake up in the morning and I decide that Papaya is closed. Mm-hmm. I realized that you open up something and have full control of it. So why not close something also with full control of it? There are rituals attendant to an opening, but at the same time, there are rituals attendant to a closing, right? There are more rituals in closing, actually, if you come to think of it.
Yeah, but also with the closing, it's still kind of the sense of becoming because you're really cultivating your archival project. And you're allowing new entities to form, new artist spaces, and you've also taught a lot of young artists. You've mentored them. I know even Martha Tienza did your residency program in 2009. So I think that there is this constant state of becoming, and it's really great that it gets to live on in this way and also end in this other way, in the way that you would have wanted it to be done.
I'm going to jump in and say that the Green Papaya Art Projects is currently being digitized and will be housed in the archives of what is it called? Sorry, Asia Art Archive. So that's, you said that was earlier when we were talking, you said that was going to be opening at the end of this year?
Part of the archive will be launched by AAA before the end of the year. And so we were lucky enough that when we decided to close in 2016, then AAA got notified of that, and then they managed to provide some funding to start digitizing our archives and assign somebody to organize and undertake the archiving project. So I think that's one of the good things that happened when we decided to close, because other institutions were alerted that, hey, there must be something in Green Papaya that must be saved. So I would like to think of archiving as a form of ritual, actually, of closing. So it's an ongoing ritual until next year, and might even go beyond 2021 if the archiving process will not be completed. My practice is grounded on some religious thing because I was educated supposed to become a priest, but
a Jesuit priest.
Yeah. So I'm also reminded of King Solomon when at the end of his reign, his statement became the words in the book of the Ecclesiastes in the Bible, right? That there is, a time for everything. So there's a time to be born, there's a time to die, There's a time to speak up. There's a time to be silent about it. There's a time to gather stones, and there's a time to spread them. So that is actually becoming a guiding and an inspiration for us when we decide to close. So that whatever we have in terms of resources, which we were able to gather during the last 20 years, we're trying to disperse and share with a lot of people who think that they will benefit from them. So that's the second reason that convinced me to decide to close. And the last reason that really made me decide that this is the right thing to do has something to do about history writing. I came across this article by Yoonjin Kim, who is currently the curator for the Korean Pavilion for the Venice Biennale for next year, which I believe has been moved to 2022. And the theme of the Korean Pavilion is something like history has failed us, but no matter. And that is the first line in the book written by Min Jin Lee. The title of the book is Pachenko. It's about 4 generations of Koreans who were living in Japan and how they deal with history that has not been written for them and has wronged them. We encounter a lot of stories about histories written by third party or histories that were accounts of third party information. So I don't want that to happen with Green Papaya, so that the remaining 3 years that we are operating at the same time, we can write our own history. And history writing, for me, again, is another form of ritual. And if you will check our Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, we've been posting already this history writing exercise. So we've been posting about throwback Thursdays of what were memorable for us during the last 20 years, and the networking we've developed in Southeast Asia, also in parallel with other spaces in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and elsewhere.
Right. And you were writing about, I mean, a lot of you have this new project, the Right People, Wrong Time project.
Yes, yes.
That is just kind of a series of texts from defunct art initiatives. And one that I thought was really interesting is the one by Dr. David Tay, where he says, artist-run spaces aren't necessarily designed for the long run, and yet Green Papaya has managed to go for the 20 years. But it's so interesting that you created this network amongst other initiatives in Southeast Asia, and you're able to help them create their histories and help them maintain their own things, because people have also been giving you their archives, right? Like artists, other groups, etc. So in a sense, you are also the gatekeeper, or the keeper of those memories and the keeper of those archives for a lot of other people.
I think that the term gatekeeper is too big a word for us.
Maybe like a.
Sorry, but I remember in 2007, Art Asia Pacific, Andrew Merkel, the editor then, I think he's still with Art Asia Pacific, wrote something about a prediction on Green Papaya becoming an institution. But that is precisely what we have been trying to avoid.
Right.
Becoming an institution is, of course, it's a big deal. It's a lot big, whole different responsibility with it. And so we've been very, very aware from the very beginning that we will maintain our status as this small tree in the garden, and that we just continue, nurturing this tree and gathering its fruit, whatever, year after year, and offer that to institutions for them to either to dissect or to discuss about or whatever. And I am happy to say that again, that was a decision that I feel very much was the right thing to do for us. It goes without saying that by not being an institution, funding has been very, very difficult for us also.
Mhm.
And it's always the community that has come to our rescue every time we attempt to close.
Mhm.
But you know, we finally realized that you don't have to be an institution for another institution to come to your rescue. Look at AAA,
Mhm.
right? But more institutions came to our rescue after the fire. So maybe we can talk about the fire later on.
Talk about the fire. Because I guess now, I mean, going back to what you're saying about the ritual of archiving, now, I mean, after the fire, you're having to go through this ritual in a like particularly careful way,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
with, you know, trying to salvage what you can from the project space.
Right. So so the fire happened last June 3, okay? And the fire happened in this 1940s two-story house made of wood, and it was caused by faulty wiring from a neighboring unit. So that says a lot about us being a non-institution and only being able to afford a space like that, made of you know, an old house. But we were happy in that house actually. Um, it was a space where our community would gather from time to time.
And there was a bar there, Catch
There's a bar.
22.
So, I'll tell you something about the bar because this has something to do about our deliberate political actions. So there was this bar that lost its space, and this bar was being run by LGBTQ, and they have a very a close community of LGBTQ in Manila, and because they were operating in a semi-residential area, one night there was a big incident, and the whole neighborhood petitioned for them to stop operation. So when I heard about this bar losing its home, we offered our space to them for them to operate us, how you called it, um, only during the weekends. And so, but then the weekend graduated into everyday operation, and then eventually we adopted them as a bar in resident, in residence. So we had a resident bar, and then eventually our programs, we were able to merge our programs. So they would have their own program, we will have our own program. Sometimes our programs are merged together. So it was a happy marriage actually. And so we were both affected when the fire happened, and all we can do was help each other. But we also realized that their community helped us immediately after the fire.
Mm.
But what was actually uh, for me the most significant thing that happened was a few days after the fire, institutions came to us offering their help. Number one was the Lopez Museum that offered to conserve and to house the archives. And then AAA offered us their technical expertise on conservation as well. But more important than that, the chair of AAA, Claire Shu, who is also sitting in the board of a foundation in New York, facilitated the funding for us. And then there are other institutions like Goethe Institute and Mercedes Sobel, who is part of the Delfina Foundation, offering residencies for Filipinos in London, came to our rescue. And here we are, far from being an institution. We were just a small space operating with a small community of artists from the different disciplines. And we realized that our work over the last 20 years have been very much appreciated. So yes, we lost a lot in the fire, But I think we gained a lot of self-confidence after that. And so we thought, hey, now we can be an institution. But hey, we're closing next year. So, yes, the fire was something bad. It was sad. We were sad it happened, but at the same time, it opened up a lot of doors for us also. It even opened up a door for us to continue operation beyond 2021. But we said, no, we're happy to leave the archives behind. We're happy that Lopez Museum, all these institutions are helping us save, conserve, and establish our archive facility again. But after 2021, we're happy to close.
Mm-hmm. And you helped. Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Well, you with the fire, I think that some works have been taken on a new life, and like even these archival materials have taken on a new life, wouldn't you say? Like they in themselves have become another thing.
Yes.
And
yes.
like even your own projects, right? Because your studio was above Green Papaya, and that was unfortunately affected as well. But you have some projects that are now included in your show, your ongoing show, but they are a different iteration for what they were before. And so that in themselves is the added historicizing of this horrible event. But it's a new life, it's a new iteration, it's a new thing, which is an interesting concept to contemplate. It's not necessarily the end of things, and luckily you were able to save a lot, but you're still able to work with new things, new materials.
Exactly. I was trying to explain earlier why I am wearing this mask. Because I was moving around the space earlier and was tinkering with boxes filled with our archives, and I realized that there are still dusts and mold residue in the air. Mm-hmm. So I'm very sensitive to things like that, and I'm just trying to protect myself.
Yeah. And here I thought you were being extra careful.
No. I don't have to wear a mask. I'm inside of office. So, but just to be safe, I have to wear the mask tonight.
Do you want to talk about kind of what quarantine has been like in the Philippines? I think that's really interesting because it's been the longest lockdown in the world, and it's just ever going. It's been incredibly strict. Like there have been military posts, like checkpoints into Manila, and there have been like, with the military really being the ones to enforce COVID restrictions. Like you have a curfew, people are being detained for staying out past curfew, but you're living in those circumstances now. Do you want to speak a little bit about what that's been like and kind of how it relates to the most recent project that we wrote about for Art Review with the posters and the 20th anniversary?
Yeah. I would like to say first that we're thankful for Art Review and for Marv to have written about those posters, because during the time of strict lockdown, that was the only thing that we could do. We couldn't go out much in the street to join protests and rallies. So the only thing that we could do at the time was to coordinate actions with other like-minded organizations. And so we thought of, putting up those posters containing our sentiment and our political stand regarding the condition in the Philippines and in Manila in particular. At least now, Marv, those military and police checkpoints are gone.
Great.
But still, we're under the longest lockdown in the world. But what is worrying us actually is the numbers have not gone down. So government is trying to not cover up, but ignore the numbers by opening up commercial establishments again and allowing people to go to work again. So we don't know when this will end for the Philippines or for Manila actually. We have something like 2 to 3,000 cases a day up to now.
Not to mention like the Filipino health workers abroad that are largely the ones that have been, like Filipino nurses and health workers have been the ones that have been going abroad, and they are the largest group that have suffered, I think, like in terms of death. So there's that aspect as well. It's just never ending. And then with the resources, lack of resources, you know.
What is unbelievable actually is the recent survey approval ratings of the president.
Mm-hmm.
Also Asia 2 weeks ago was 92% approval rating for the president. And it's hard to imagine how the survey came to that figure. So there are theories going around, and scholars are trying to analyze the survey. So I think what's becoming to be apparent is surveys are not reliable anymore because people actually are afraid to give an answer that will displease the administration. So for people to be safe, if they get caught up in a survey or in a, somebody asking them questions about the current situation in the Philippines or in Manila, they would rather be safe than, give accurate answers on how they think and how they feel and how they regard the current administration in relation to its response to the pandemic.
And then within this pandemic too, it's kind of being used as a cover for a lot of other, political atrocities, like the passing of the anti-terror bill. And like, within the last 4 months, extrajudicial killings have been up by 50%, which the Human Rights Watch has reported. So at least that's an independent entity that you can kind of rely on. And so with this, it's, it's a very scary time because so many other things are being eclipsed, or it's eclipsing so many other events that are going on. So like with the anti-terror bill, obviously it is a really broad bill that says basically anyone or anything can be considered terrorism, and you can be incarcerated for that. And so this is a really scary thing. It obviously has a lot of implications for journalists because already it's quite a scary and unsafe place, but then also with the implication of the arts. And perhaps we can go back to the Marcos years for a little bit, but it was the first letter of instruction by Ferdinand Marcos to take over ABS-CBN, which also echoes with what just happened, but then also all the other news sites and how that then trickled down into the arts. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The anti-terror bill actually, this is my personal take on the anti-terror bill actually. There has been attempts the last 2-3 years for Duterte to proclaim a martial law, but it has always been received with suspicion, and there were some, I suppose, objections within his own cabinet. So they found a way to circumvent or to skirt around declaring martial law by crafting a bill that will empower the state to arrest people without due process. So that is an equivalent of martial law, discarding the writ of habeas corpus during the Marcos years, so that the state can arrest anybody on suspicion of inciting to rebellion or being a member of the Communist Party or the New People's Army. So it is very, very scary because this government has no patience for dissent, for protests and rallies. So we're just afraid that this bill will be used to bully or harass and to scare activists.
Pee-wee, can I ask about the poster project that that you did for the 20th anniversary? So, I mean, that's pretty political, like it's very directly dissenting. And I'm just wondering how that's going to affect the future of this project, because I think you wanted to turn it into a zine and publish it.
Actually, I have already. You were saying that those posters were some form of dissent. Actually, yes and no. Yes, because our constitution guarantees us to protest and to be critical about our government. But the government can turn that around. So it's a dissent now that is inciting rebellion. Um, so we have turned the posters into a zine, and we're planning to distribute this, and locally and abroad. So this contains our political position with regards to several issues, like how the government is responding to the pandemic. And the poster actually that you used for the banner of this talk, saying that grassroots communities respond better than governments, which is very, very true. Before the government was able to put together a task force to address the pandemic, people in the countrysides, in the communities, were already doing food distribution, community kitchens, and we're assisting people, poor people in big cities. And I think there was even a time when the state was envious of what these communities were doing, that they prevented communities from distributing food, you know, because they think that it's only government that has the right to attend to the needs of the people. But when these needs are not being addressed by government, then of course, I mean, if your neighbor is in need of something, then you have to go and rescue him.
I mean,
yeah.
Originally, you were posting them on Facebook and on Instagram first.
Yeah.
If anyone logs into their account, so you'll be able to scroll down and see like the entire thing. And you're also doing new ones. So I've just seen like you've been doing a red series, yes, and then you've got a camo series.
Yes, yes.
And I'm just wondering, like how much are you worried about doing this and
it is worrisome, but I also worry about the other members of the team. So I just would like to mention that Green Papaya is not just me. So there are young people working with us towards this closing ritual. And there are, I think, about 7 of us. We call ourselves a Papaya Office. So we put together all these posters and all these campaigns. I worry more for them because I've gone through this during the Marcos years, and we keep on telling ourselves during that time, hey, if we get scared, then what's gonna happen to us? Actually, I got scared during the Marcos years because in 1987, I was informed that there was much information about what I've been doing. So I have to leave the country for 2 years. So I actually lived in Sydney between 1987 to 1989. So I only came back when things, was a little bit more manageable, and I started the Visayas Biennial in 1990, which is going on until now. Yeah, it's scary what this terror bill will bring us. We have done this already. It's there. It's out there. It's all these things are in our social media accounts.
Right, and they have been quite vigilant about social media. Like they have been going through Facebook and flagging dissent online. And I think at one point too, a ton of fake Facebook accounts appeared online with the names of activists and students who were critical in their dissent towards Marco said that was a slip, but they're
Yeah, but you have to take note that our posters are very much tame compared to campaigns of other more progressive organizations, like CAP, for example, SACA, which is affiliated with the Peasants Movement, Sinagbayan. There are a lot of artist organizations involved in the protest movement, resisting all these bills, the drug war, etc., and the way the government is responding to the crisis. So we managed to come up with something that we think is pointed, but at the same time calculated, that we can still invoke our rights under the Constitution, that we're only expressing our political dissent. It has nothing, it's nothing criminal.
Mhm.
So if you are scared, can you imagine how many more are scared who are part of this more progressive, more radical organizations?
But there's certainly a place for this kind of dissent. It must be said that people are allowed to
Yeah.
voice their
This
opposition.
is very interesting times
Mhm.
in the Philippines, actually. If not for the pandemic, there's already a drove of journalists who are present in Manila, just like the Marcos years, towards the decline of the dictatorship, until the time that Marcos finally was booted out of the palace.
Mhm. Actually, just now, like today, I was listening to a conference with the Ang Daku for the journalists, and Maria Ressa was speaking. And Maria Ressa is, of course, the founder of Rappler, and she was just convicted of cyber libel this past summer. And she has been a really strict, not strict, but very tough. She's been keeping track of what Duterte has been doing since he was in the office. She's also very critical. Rappler is also very critical in their dissent. They're kind of they're a great news source. But she was saying that if we don't do something now, it's the end of democracy in the Philippines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. What will happen to us if there's no dissent, there's nobody can protest, because everyone is afraid of government.
Mm-hmm. Actually, one of my favorite visuals from, I saw a photograph of the protest immediately after I think the bill was signed, and it was people actually social distancing on EDSA in protest of the terror bill, which was a very poignant image, I think.
And there are more than 30 petitions lodged with our Supreme Court, not to implement the bill, or to abolish the bill. So we still don't know what's going to happen with all those 30 or so petitions.
And we were saying earlier in our pre-chat, we were talking about the situation in Thailand.
Yes.
And I wondered whether or not maybe you could sort of say a bit more about maybe the parallels or the differences in how things are able to change politically there, and
I'm not really that quite familiar with the political situation in Bangkok in particular, but we're only aware of a number of young students out there in the street protesting the monarchy, actually. And I can only envy the number. I wish we could have more of them also out in the street. The only parallel that I can see is that the Bangkok protest movement is mostly composed of young people. And I think in the Philippines, in Manila, there are more young people now in the protest movement, young as 18, 19, who are members of different organizations.
Yeah. I wonder if, I'm just looking at the time, I wonder if now's a good time maybe to talk about a bit about Viva XCon Biennial that you started.
I come from a region in the Philippines that is archipelagic. If you look at the map of the Philippines, it's composed of 7,000 plus islands. But if you look at, there are three major islands. So we have Luzon, where Manila is, the capital. And then we have the Visayas in the middle and Mindanao. If you look at Luzon and Mindanao, they're almost landlocked. But if you look at the Visayas, the Visayas is composed of smaller islands. So it's quite difficult for islanders to get together because transportation, sea transport is almost non-existent in the region. So for us to get together, sometimes people have to fly to Manila and then fly to a specific island. So I come from a small island right in the middle of the Philippines, which is Panay Island. And that was the entry point actually. Visayas actually was the entry point of Magellan when he came to conquer, not discover the Philippines. Okay?
And then he killed in the Philippines as well.
And he was killed in the Philippines as well. So the idea to organize Viva XCon was to consolidate the Visayas Islands into a one cohesive cultural movement. So it was, Viva XCon was a carryover of the cultural work we were doing in Negros Island, in Bacolod in particular. So when Cory came into power, there was much ado about all this democratic space, and that we're moving towards democratization. And but what happened was it was a repeat of old administrations prior to Marcos. So we just put back another elite in power, and the fundamental social ills are still there. Like in Negros, for example, you cannot imagine that the sugar industry is still being run in a semi-feudal system. So after Marcos left, the cultural movement actually continued to flourish. Okay, and so we thought of, because there was a democratic space, so we thought of reaching out outside our area of operation. So we tried to reach out to other islands in the Visayas by forming Viva XCon. So it is easy to organize something like a festival because our culture is so prone to having fiestas and coming together and having a reunion, drinks, and food. No? So Viva XCon is something like that, but it is also more than that, because by coming together, then now we have the platform to talk about issues that are similar to islands or particular problems in each island, and how we correlate this to the current social and political and cultural histories of each island. So what we were trying to achieve was strengthen the cultural movement. But at some point, so we started that in 1990, and incidentally, we are celebrating the 30th year of Viva XCon. It's going to open in Bacolod on November 8th. But somehow, somewhere along the way, Viva XCon has shifted its focus and down, has dropped out some political trajectories, and some islands are, because Viva XCon moves from one island to another. So each island would have its own program and agenda, and if that particular host is some kind of apolitical, then we expect that there will be no political discussions in the plenaries. So we don't know after the Viva XCon in 2020 how the new Viva XCon will progress after this.
Yeah, I think it's really evident from what you've been telling us that building networks has been a really important part of your, not necessarily your artistic practice, your personal one, but your whole ethos about how you approach the arts and culture and community and politics, and it's all intertwined, and you're building these networks that can support each other. And I think it's particularly interesting for us in the West to learn about this, because especially with this pandemic, we've all been stuck at home, and suddenly the conversation has been all around building communities and supporting your communities. And it's interesting that you have been doing that for 30 years, more than 30 years.
Well, what drove us into doing that was, first, we can't rely on government to provide for the needs of our communities. There are no funding institutions. There's no funding system in the Philippines that we can rely on. So self-organization has become the norm. And then we have to learn to fend for ourselves, really, in most cases. And with Viva XCon, we organized Viva XCon first before government not took over it, but decided to support Viva XCon. So I think if you do something and government sees it as something that they can benefit from, so there is some kind of support. But I think it's really more on the communities, because if there is no community to take charge of the whole event, so even with government, with little government support, nothing will happen actually.
Marv, do you have anything to add to it?
Well, I'm just thinking back to, like, you know, the Marcos years, where there were a lot of groups that came together, like CAP came together during the Marcos years. Black Artists of Asia, which Pee-wee, you were involved with, was also founded during the Marcos years, right?
CAP, we're talking about Concerned Artists of the Philippines.
Yes, and then BAA. That was also founded during, you know, the Marcos years. And those initiatives were really important for bringing artists together and for empowering them into these larger movements. Like, artists were able to disseminate their, you know, artworks between one another really discreetly within these communities, and, you know, create these bonds between others who are also anti-government at that time. And so the connection between the communities is incredibly important, because, as like Pee-wee says, the government doesn't really give money to these organizations. And then also, like, when you are fighting against something like the Marcos era, you have to do it band together. And like the People Power Revolution in '86 was a peaceful revolution, and that was largely organized by communities, you know, rather than like any sort of government, because the government was the one that they were opposing. So these communities are incredibly important, and I love too that Green Papaya fosters artists, and especially the young ones, and helps them grow, because this is who will continue to take on the arts world from then on. And as Pee-wee says, like they're closing Green Papaya so that new artist initiatives take place, and they're not going, Pee-wee's not going away completely, you know, but there's still that mentorship. And so that continue giving back is inherently important to the community and people.
So what
yeah, sorry.
are you going to do next, Pee-wee?
I would like first to comment on the CAP thing.
Yeah, sure.
Merv, I was not one of the founders of CAP.
Oh no, Black Artists of Asia.
So CAP was founded by the late renowned filmmaker Lino Broca, who eventually became a national artist for film in the Philippines. So when Lino Broca founded with other artists, filmmakers, in 1983, he happened to be in Bacolod the same year. So when he came to Bacolod, we were able to take the opportunity of his presence, and we were able to organize our own local chapter there of CAP. So I became a vice chair of CAP, but chair of the visual arts section. I'll talk a little bit about Black artists in Asia. So CAP became the sort of the cultural arm of the protest movement in Negros Island. So we were at the forefront of the cultural movement, of the protest movement until 1987. So from 1983 to 1987, we were running this cultural house in Bacolod, where there at any given time there are about 20 to 30 people living there. So general workers, artists doing murals for rallies. So it was actually a big house, and which became something like an operations center for the cultural sector. But when the Cory Aquino took power, some members of the concerned artists of the Philippines in Bacolod felt that there was no need to continue with the cultural struggle with the left, because clearly CAP was aligned with the left. And so, as a tactical formation, we organized a BAA so that there is a new organization that is no longer aligned with the left, that is not connected with CAP, but still maintains its being a progressive, socially relevant group of artists. So this became, so BAA, which stands for Black Artists in Asia, actually came from the ranks of the concerned artists of the Philippines. So this, I just wanted to give that context. And Faye was asking me, so what now? Where are you from here? I'm going back, Faye, to the Visayas Island. So I'm resuming my practice there and live a quiet life. That's it. That's the plan.
Quiet life.
Well, this has been a really great conversation. I'm wondering if, Maureen, should we turn to some questions now, if there are any from the audience?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just wanted to, of course, thank you for this conversation. It was really interesting because I believe that a lot of people don't know much about the situation in the Philippines and by the art scene. So I was really happy to share that with a Western European side of our audience, which is, of course, really, that matters a lot. And the voices that you've raised and the questions and the political issues that you highlighted are absolutely necessary to be learned, and we need to know more about that. And so this is why I think it's really important that you were you were with us tonight. And maybe what I wanted to do is that Clarisse, if I can share my screen, because you were talking about the posters that you've done for the 20th anniversary. So I was, of course, and I imagine as a lot of people maybe participating into this conversation, I was, of course, curious about the entire series that you created. So maybe we can share them, and Kiwi, if you want to make a comment on that. But I think it's important because the message there really matches all the conversation and the subject that you mentioned and brought up into the conversation. And I think it's important to visually, because you're also a visual artist, a performative artist, to see them and to watch them. So I guess I can do it right. And they're here. You can see my screen. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I imagine, so here is the first one.
Yes.
And I can, yeah, I can, go from the first one to the number 20 that I saw, and maybe you can stop me if you want to comment something.
Yeah. So maybe I can annotate some posters, but I think most posters are self defined. But to start with, of course, the writing by Arundhati Roy was very much inspiring for us. And the posters, most of these posters were done the day before they were posted, because we were reacting to events that were unfolding every day in Manila. So, these posters were not done in one go. So we anticipate what was gonna happen for that week, and so we address specific issues that happened for the particular week. Well, this is part of an exhibition in Viva XCon. So, yeah. Yes, so there was, if we go back to the previous poster, so there was much attention given to the frontliners who were mostly medical professionals. And we tend to forget that the farmers continue to farm, the fishermen continue to fish, because it was important for us to have food on the table. Yes, I think there were cases when there is a lot of attention to a particular issue or things that the government has failed to do. Then we notice that the government somehow also try to address that issue. This is very, very true. The Philippines has the most cases of COVID.
Healthcare workers.
Yeah, healthcare workers in Asia. Yeah, continue. Go ahead. Yes. Yes, very true also. Those are events in the past.
And this is the poster.
This is the poster that we used for the announcement for this talk, which is, I think, very, very appropriate for the topic that we have. Yes, definitely. People can't go out to work, so the economy is up,
And yesterday, when we had a little pre-meeting, we were talking about how these posters are so simple and how you weren't sure how they were going to do because they were so simple. But I think that simplicity adds to the severity of the situation, and it kind of eliminates all the frills and excess and uses really obvious language to communicate what you're trying to say. And as well, they kind of echo this literature like Arundhati Roy. She's a prize-winning writer, and you, even in your personal practice, you reference a lot of literature, but this harkens back to literature kind of as a revolutionary device in the Philippines, like with Jose Rizal and his writings. It's that kind of revolutionized Filipinos against the Spanish. Like, this is again going back to the simplicity of the word, which is
exactly.
a great thing. And then you also were printing these posters, which is why you see like the skips in the background. So that adds like a kind of timeliness and site specificity to the works. I love these posters. I think they're so interesting and could write endlessly about them.
Thank you.
Yeah, so basically this is why I wanted to share them with all of you. And well, again, I think it was very important to see them and to see this strong message and the way you also produce them, like you mentioned it, Marv. Well, thank you again very much. And so Clarisse and Lara were connected also to the audience. Maybe you have questions that you want to share with us.
We do, actually.
We do, yes. We have had several questions. So the first one, Piwi. So we have talked about the political context in the Philippines and about the ability to protest there. So would you say that art manages to be an efficient resistance strategy where more classic ones fail?
I would like to believe that art is an important component in a protest action. I also know that sectoral organizations in the Philippines, like the peasant sector, the labor sector, would have their own cultural group. So art is very much part of the struggle in the Philippines.
Thank you very much. We have another question, and this one actually has to do with your relation with the art world at large. You talked a lot about Viva XCon and the identity of the islands of the archipelago. I also know that you have founded Black Artists in Asia. So I feel like there's very much a claim for the regional characterization of your work's identity. And the question is, what is your position towards the growing globalized identity of contemporary art?
I think we get more concrete identity outside when our identity as a local is well defined. Mm-hmm. So we only get to be global when we first establish to be local artists. Okay. We always tend to believe that art is universal. Yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. But we only be also universal and international. But we can only be international if we first become national, right? So I think it's the same. It's not a metaphor, but I think it's basic principle to first be identified as yourself, to be able to be recognized in an international setting or in a global setting.
Thank you very much for your answer. Actually, that's it for us.
All right. Yay.
How are you feeling, Pee-wee? It's late.
I feel relieved.
We haven't.
Good.
Excuse us, we have a last-minute question that just came up. It is about the zine you were talking about. The question is, where is the zine distributed outside of the Philippines?
We're gonna relaunch our website towards the end of November. Okay. So we're building everything. And so we are putting things back together again in a more orderly manner. So we're offering not only this zine, but you mentioned about the red posters earlier. So we're doing that also as well, and the camo posters.
And are you distributing worldwide?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Yes. That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, this has been good.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again so much, Fee. And of course, I have to thank you because I think it was the perfect way also to go deeper, maybe in this symposium and this week of conferences, to go deeper into a sort of, if you accept this term, but activism and political activism, because you, of course, you, like we said, gather your art practice through a site which was situated, of course, the way you mentioned it, but it is also very important and very straightforward that you, of course, fight against and for your ideas, which is, of course, something very important. And the way you talked about the posters, I think it's at some point, art, the way you mentioned it, can also be very direct and support very clearly commitment, the way you talked about it. So to me, it's a wonderful way to end this and to support the project the way you did. And I'm happy to have you. I'm very honored to have you tonight. So I don't know if you have last comments, and Fee and Marv, of course, I would leave you the last word if you want, because it was really happy and humbly honored again to have you, because I learned so much tonight, really.
I just wanted to say thank you to Thanks for Nothing for hosting us and giving us this opportunity to talk about this project and to talk about Pee-wee's work. And also thank you to Marv for joining, because basically you're an expert on this and I know nothing. So it's been really great having your input and having you in this talk with us. Yeah, and thank you, Pee-wee, for staying up so late. And, good morning now.
Yeah. Thank you also, Thanks for Nothing and Art Review. But thanks to Mar for bringing our posters to your attention. I think the article in Art Review helped us a lot to get these posters across outside the field.
Well, thank you, Pee-wee. Thank you, everyone. This has been great. I mean, Pee-wee, I've been following your work for a long time, and I'm very glad that we got to learn more about Green Papaya. I think it's a great initiative, and I'm glad to see that everything will be archived, and hopefully we'll be able to see some more things from the past.
Yes. Watch out for us in 2021.
Absolutely, we will watch for you. And so as a last word, I would say long live Green Papaya Project, and on your island also, and in a very quiet life, because this is what we wish for 2021 to everyone, basically. Exactly. And for the French speakers, merci à tous d'avoir été avec nous. C'est donc la fin de ce Symposium 2020 avec Thanks for Nothing. Et comme je le disais à l'instant, je trouve que la parole de Pee-wee et le projet de Green Papaya Project, qui a été présenté par Fee et par Marv ce soir, montre à quel point effectivement il peut y avoir un dialogue très concret entre un lieu situé tel qu'il l'exposait, une pratique artistique, sociale, engagée, performative, qui intègre aussi les communautés LGBTQ+, comme il le disait, grâce aux bars, etc., avec un vrai discours politique qui est très franc et très clair. Voilà, et je trouve que c'est en fait une très belle façon de conclure justement ces discussions sur la notion de l'art, de la durabilité et de l'engagement concret, puisque Pee-wee incarne, comme vous l'avez compris et comme on l'a tous suivi avec attention ce soir, tout cela à la fois. Voilà, merci à tous. Merci aussi à l'équipe de Thanks, à Clarisse, Lara, Agathe et Mariaska aussi, qui nous ont accompagnés pendant toute cette semaine. Et voilà, et puis la semaine prochaine, regardez, en fait, j'ai vraiment très envie de continuer ça. Non, peut-être l'année prochaine, en 2021, au Musée du Louvre. Et puis sinon, on trouvera de toute façon beaucoup de nouveaux partenaires. So thanks again for everything. Thanks again to Pee-wee, to Marv, to Fee, to Art Review, and all the team also at Art Review that helped us through this week. And thank you also to Lucia and the Serpentine Galleries team for all the debates that we had. And it was a very interesting and passionate to me week with all of you. And so good night to Manila, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.